So I just did a thing, except it wasn't so much an event as a process. So as of the moment that I finished this book, Introduction to the New Existentialism by Colin Wilson, was the moment that I finished my 1,000th book. I have been working towards that goal for years and years and years, ever since I started counting how many books that I've read back in 2014 with Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. And so, I mean, it took me 7+ years to actually make it. I mean, I fought for this goal. I put so much into it. I basically chose what kind of work that I would do around how much time that I would get to read. I mean, I read in my car. I read audiobooks. I read ebooks. I read on the plane. Flying all over the world, different places. I read, when I was just every single opportunity to read these fantastic books, the best books that I could possibly find. I took that opportunity and I strung a whole bunch of those opportunities together, and I basically did it 1,000 times, and I'm here with my 1,000th book. I also wanted to pick something that would make me look good, so I chose this one by Colin Wilson. And it was basically the best philosophy book that I could find that I hadn't read yet. And this is, it's not the useless, boring stuff that they teach you in first year university, like do trees exist and like what do you think of chairs? This is stuff that's like actually useful for real people's lives, and if you want to become a real person. And basically from the moment that I read or that I finished reading The Outsider, Colin Wilson's first book, and I'll speak a little bit about that later on in the video, it was the beginning of the end of the way that I used to be living. So this book, Introduction to the New Existentialism, there's a lot to cover, and basically, I mean, when you read a great book, you just have to tell people about it, so here we go. So welcome back to the channel. My name is Matt Karamazov. I'd like to first thank all of my supporters on Patreon, specifically Jeremy Steingraber. Together we've raised $510 at the moment for Doctors Without Borders, and $150 for First Book, which they give books to kids who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford them or have access to them. And actually, for every new subscriber to the channel, what I do is I donate $1 to First Book. And I mean, these are small little totals. I mean, it's nothing compared to what we're going to raise, and donate in the future, but I mean, it's a pretty good start. I want to thank everyone for supporting me along the way. Okay, so that is it, but I want to give you an introduction a little bit to Colin Wilson himself. So Colin Wilson exploded onto the literary scene with this book, The Outsider, which came out in 1956 to massive acclaim. It's a survey of the existentialist responses to the most urgent questions about existence and meaning in life, and more specifically, it's about how certain individuals have fought to carve out a life for themselves inside a universe that often appears, if not hostile, to human flourishing, at least indifferent. The existentialists believe that the universe doesn't really care about us at all, at least on the individual level, which sounds harsh, but it's also the arena in which human freedom is exercised. Your life is completely up to you, regardless of whether you exist within some sort of grand scheme of the universe. Now, as you can imagine, many of the earlier existentialists are a lot more pessimistic and really not much fun to be around, at least compared to people like Colin Wilson. And his books, like The Outsider and Introduction to the New Existentialism, is about returning to ourselves and reinstilling confidence in our own senses and our own sense experience when it comes to the ultimate project of evaluating the purpose and meaning of existence. One of the main tools that many of these philosophers used is called phenomenology, which is basically a needlessly complicated word to describe the analysis of your senses. And so whereas Blake, the poet, he said 5 windows light the caverned man, he's speaking about our 5 senses and how we can use them to illuminate our own existence and bring some of our biggest problems and opportunities into finer focus. So Colin Wilson, he says that the remedy is to make phenomenological analysis a second nature and to make it a fundamental premise of our lives that the world of beauty and intensity has a real existence. Which is actually difficult to do because ordinary life seems so limited and bland and really not very exciting. He says that ordinary consciousness is limited and therefore our sense of the value of existence is inaccurate. Basically, we don't realize how wonderful and marvelous and amazing that life itself, existence, actually is because our 5 windows, so to speak, need to be cleaned. So he takes aim at all the old existentialists like Sartre, who basically said man is a useless restless passion. That's a direct quote. Albert Camus, who I am a large supporter of. However, he's all focused on suicide and the ultimate meaning and futility of life. And then you've got Heidegger with his being towards death. So reading these guys, you think that not many of them really had much of a life. I don't think any of them ever pressed the like button for the YouTube algorithm. And you look at their lives and it doesn't really seem like they're really having a whole lot of fun. What I loved about existentialism is the emphasis on personal freedom and the awareness of how powerful we actually are and how we can command our own destinies. If that sounds dumb or pious, I'm sorry. But that's the focus. These are the things that they talked about, as opposed to, whether chairs exist. So you have all these sort of dreary philosophies that are sort of pessimistic and sort of gray and bland, and here's Wilson, just the total opposite. He's like, how cool is this, man? There is music and beauty and art and friends. There's so many things that make life worth living, and if you're not focused on those things, you're not gonna see them. Right here, right now, we're spinning at top speed, hanging in empty space that goes on forever and ever, and we don't really know what's gonna happen, but we're here, and the question that life is asking of us is, are we going to be here or not? Now, we're getting to the end of the video here, but you can't really talk about existentialism without talking about death. And Colin Wilson, he brings it up and he talks about it all the time, and but not in the sort of dreary, pessimistic way that you have all of the old existentialists doing it. Rather, it's more like in the way that Dostoevsky or Graham Greene sort of conceptualize it. Thinking about death shocks you into being alive, and it gives you some sort of idea of the ultimate value of your existence and the ultimate value of everyone else's existence as well. So there are two stories. The people that I just mentioned. So Dostoevsky, he was about to be executed in Russia as part of a plot to undermine the government, and he was actually like minutes away. And this was before he wrote any of his famous novels. He was minutes away from being shot, and at the last moment, his sentence was commuted, and he was sent to Siberia instead. So they saved his life, and that moment was like the beginning of the rest of his life. It was the first day of the rest of his life, whereas he was so close, and now basically every minute of life that he had left was a total gift, and he realized the ultimate value of his existence. And the same with Graham Greene. He's a novelist, and what he used to do as a teenager, he must not have had too many friends. He would play Russian roulette by himself, and he would put one bullet in his revolver, spin it around, and he would fire. And every single time that the gun didn't go off, it would shock him into life, and he would realize that the world is actually a beautiful, amazing, spectacular place, and life is there to be lived. Colin Wilson brings up Dostoevsky quite a bit, and specifically Crime and Punishment, and he says that Raskolnikov, when he thought about the possibility of being executed for murder, reflected that he would prefer to stand on a narrow ledge for all eternity, surrounded by darkness and tempest, rather than die at once. The fear of death has raised his consciousness of freedom to a point where he becomes aware of the absolute value of his existence. Thinking about death in this way can shock you into being more alive. And so we often think about death as taking something away from us, but it's giving us something every single day. It's giving us the opportunity to become more fully alive. Anyway, I love Colin Wilson. This was the perfect choice for book number 1000. I definitely think you should read The Outsider if you have any sort of philosophical bent at all. However, this book is part of the Outsider cycle. So this is the 7th book in the series. So it goes from The Outsider all the way to Introduction to the New Existentialism. So I would suggest, if you're going to make the commitment to read all of them, I would read them in order. But if you're only going to read one, definitely just read The Outsider. It's one of my absolute favorite books. It's just phenomenal. So if you enjoyed this review, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, check out the video description for details on the monthly book giveaway. If you love to read, if you love books, you'll find so much for you down in the description above and beyond the giveaway. And you want to be subscribed to the channel because next video is book number 1001. It's called Don't Panic by Neil Gaiman. It's the story of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And next video you can watch right over here. It's the 50 best books of 2020, and I read 179 books that year, and these are the 50 best. So that's it. Train hard, read heavy, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.